Greetings, everybody. I'm about to recapitulate the talk that I just gave at Evolution 2025. One of the reasons for this is that the actual recording of the talk will not be released until about 3 weeks from now, maybe 4 weeks from now. And there's also a chance that my talk could be canceled given the contentious, the controversial nature of the remarks that I made. I want to thank everyone who had attended the dress rehearsal where I gave one version of the talk, which has now been substantially changed before delivery at Evolution 2025. I want to thank everyone who provided the constructive criticisms that I think made the talk as succinct and clear as possible. It was also very forthright and pointed, in as much as I tried to show that that biology does not rest on the foundation of evolution, but rather design. However, I tried to say this as most diplomatically and scientifically as I could, appropriate, using words and terms and concepts appropriate to the venue of Evolution 2025. It certainly wouldn't be something I would say in a church. So with that, this is going to be a recapitulation of that talk. I will try to recapitulate it as best as possible, with the only variation being I'm going to talk about 25 to 50% slower than I actually did. All of the presenters were under the gun to get their lifelong work, so to speak, presented in a mere 13 minutes. And so there was some expectation that as we blasted through our slides, people who were really interested in what we had to say could rewatch the video and play stuff in slow motion so that they could digest it. So with that, here is my talk at Evolution 2025. On behalf of myself and my co-authors, I extend thanks and greetings to the organizers and participants of Evolution 2025. My lead author, Bill Basner, is an emeritus professor of mathematics. John Sanford is a retired Cornell research professor and a genetic engineer famously known for his invention, the gene gun, which, by the way, is in the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. Ola Hasjer is a professor of population genetics at Stockholm University and a distinguished mathematician in Sweden. I'm Salvador Cordova. I'm presently a PhD student in biomolecular engineering at Liberty University, with 5 previous science degrees, including a master's degree in applied physics from Johns Hopkins University. I was previously a senior engineer and scientist in the aerospace and defense industry, working for MITRE, before getting retrained in biology by John Sanford and studying at the FAES Graduate School at the National Institutes of Health. We report on ongoing work that builds upon our previously published works in population genetics, protein biology, structural bioinformatics, and unpublished works in biophysics. So, what brings me here today? It is this comment by Richard Lewontin, who said, "The problem is that it is not entirely clear what fitness is." The problem is that it is not entirely clear what fitness is. And no concept in evolutionary biology has been more confusing. No concept in evolutionary biology has been more confusing. Further, he laments on the incommensurability of the original Darwinian conception of fitness with the definition of fitness in modern population genetics. I like that word, incommensurability. And it is my goal today to add even more confusion and more incommensurability to the issue of what fitness actually is. Just kidding. Apologies in advance that I have to blast through these slides. Lewontin's lamentations are also echoed by other researchers to varying degrees. I list some here that can be investigated further by re-watching a recording of this talk in slow motion. Sorry, but we presenters are all under tight constraints today, and we're just going to be blasting through slides. I recently queried Google Generative AI and asked, "Why is evolutionary fitness ill-defined?" It responded, "Evolutionary fitness is an ill-defined term because it's a complex, context-dependent concept that is difficult to measure and define precisely. Charles Darwin wrote of endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, organs of extreme perfection and complication, yet paradoxically he said, "What a book a devil's chaplain might write on the clumsy, wasteful, blundering, low, and horridly cruel works of nature." For Darwin, the process of natural selection resolved this paradox. Darwin himself wrote, "The presence of much suffering agrees well with the view that all organic beings have been developed through variation and natural selection." That said, it has become fashionable in light of recent discoveries in biophysics to say, life is more perfect than we imagined, which is also the title of a frequent and popular lecture given by William Bialik, a Princeton biophysicist and National Academy of Science member. It's easy to believe biological systems are technologically inferior to human-engineered systems for various reasons. First, there is, as Darwin pointed out, lots of suffering, blundering, cruelty, and waste in the world. Second, human-engineered systems often outperform biological systems in certain, but not all, metrics. Third, a far, far more subtle but significant issue is something illustrated by Shannon's noisy channel coding theorem. That is, communication systems that are optimized for compactness must, as a matter of principle, allow large numbers of errors to enter a communication and/or storage system that are later remediated by error correction systems such as Reed-Solomon and Bose-Chaduri-Hakogen schemes. By way of comparison, DNA has numerous ongoing breakdowns and errors, but DNA repair mechanisms correct almost all of those errors. There's an entire journal dedicated to DNA repair. So, as a rule of thumb, the more complex, compact, and high-performing a system is, the more prone to breakdown and errors it will be. Hence, we can be misled to think an otherwise high-tech device is deeply flawed. With that in mind, here is one example of a feature in biology that was previously viewed as clumsy and blundering, but then later termed as ingeniously designed. The phrase ingeniously designed was used in a PNAS paper addressing specifically the backward wiring of the human retina. This is a case example of something previously viewed as clumsy and blundering, only to be later deemed ingeniously designed. As a former engineer, I love that phrase, ingeniously designed. Now fasten your seatbelts. In the interest of time, I now have to go into machine gun mode and fire off a long list of examples, which should be easy to track down by replaying a recording of this talk in slow motion. Life is more perfect than we imagined, illustrating fitness through physics. Some superior technological secrets have come to light from a deep-sea organism. Modern technology cannot yet compete with some of the sophisticated optical systems possessed by biological organisms. Next, bird quantum magnetic compass. The bird quantum magnetic compass operates at the limit of the quantum limit. Next, exciton transport is 100% efficient in photosynthesis, which human engineers can't ever exceed in solar cells. Limosa lapponica can fly 9 days straight with no stops or rest or sleep, 11,680 kilometers, weighs 10 ounces. We can't make anything today so energy efficient. Next, the human brain operates at 25 watts. A comparable silicon-based machine would require 10 million watts. The brain operates at the extreme limit of thermodynamic efficiency defined by the Landauer principle. Therefore, human designs will never do better as a matter of principle. Next, enzymes are biocatalysts that operate with catalytic efficiency better than anything we can build from scratch, especially enzymes like topoisomerase, which I happen to have published on. Next, sharks can sense electric fields generated in the muscles of its prey. This is at the limit of what is physically possible. The eye can detect a single photon, the nose a single molecule. Therefore, human designs cannot do better as a matter of principle. Natalie Angier of the New York Times, after interviewing several biophysicists, said that biological systems couldn't get faster, more sensitive, or more efficient without first relocating to an alternate universe with alternate physical constants. Emmanuel Todorov at University of Washington mused, You might say, well, the human body is sloppy, but no, we're better designed than any robot. This also agrees with the work of Stuart Burgess, professor of biomechanics and robotics of 40 years, who incorporated award-winning biologically inspired designs into robots and spacecrafts. And the final frontier of excellence in biological systems is in the areas of self-assembly, self-healing, and von Neumann self-replicating automata, areas in which human engineers cannot even begin to compete. When I briefly, and I emphasize briefly, worked in the field of biomolecular engineering and nanoengineering, the topic of self-assembly and self-healing was an acute, difficult, and unsolved problem in nanoengineering, at least as far as human engineering goes. But obviously it has been solved in biological systems. Nobel Prize winner Sidney Brenner said von Neumann's automata should be central to biological theory. The best examples of Turing's and von Neumann's machines are to be found in biology. Nowhere else are there such complicated systems. Code script must form the kernel of biological theory. So, let's pause. So, how do biophysical benchmarks relate to the notions of fitness and adaptation in evolutionary biology? This is really the central question in my presentation today. These physical benchmarks define the maximum possible level of fitness and adaptation in the engineering sense. The conflict between the prevailing definition of fitness in population genetics versus the engineering definition of fitness from physics came to a head when I worked on the problem of fitness maximization, especially while studying Grodwall's extraordinarily compelling paper, The Theory Was Beautiful Indeed, Rise and Fall and Circulation of Maximizing Methods in Population Genetics, 1930 through 1980. Nowhere in my reading of this historical magnum opus was there any mention of biophysical benchmarks used in determining maximum possible fitness. Yet obviously, the Bird quantum magnetic compass has maximized its performance, dare I say fitness, in magnetic sensing. Same for excitons in photosynthesis, energy efficiency of the human brain, etc. Now, to illustrate this, consider this rhetorical question. How do engineers determine if something is adapted to fly? If one asked an engineer how a bird or butterfly is adapted to fly, he would say it is adapted to fly because its parts and its organization are consistent with the engineering principles of flight. Basically, for something to be adapted to fly, its wings must be able to generate enough lift to overcome the force of gravity. Its engines must create enough power to enable the airplane to overcome the drag caused by the air so its wings can generate enough lift, etc. That illustrates the engineering view of the meaning of adaptation. And unfortunately, it doesn't at all involve adaptation by appealing to reproductive efficiency. From numerous experiments, it now appears the engineering viewpoint of fitness is anti-correlated with the population genetic viewpoint of fitness. These experiments serve as counterexamples to the ultra-Darwinian viewpoint as expressed in popular books such as The Blind Watchmaker and Darwin's Dangerous Idea. Now, ironically, really ironically, Darwin's Dangerous Idea advocated the view that biology is engineering. And this is important because engineers now are extremely interested in biological systems to help solve problems in their own domain of work. And hence there is potentially a large amounts of money to be invested in the study of biological organisms in order to inspire and solve engineering problems. And if I may point out an important aside, Wolf and Kunin wrote, quantitatively, the evolution of genomes appears to be dominated by reduction and simplification, punctuated by episodes of complexification. Punctuated complexification. I like that idea, but unfortunately it may not be subject to repeatable experiments. That said, the idea of punctuated complexification may be supported by the notion that proteins are instantiations of Platonic forms. Thus, there may be no gradualistic Darwinian route to evolving certain proteins. When I look at amino acid residues of collagen on the left and human zinc finger 136 on the right, and colorize the residues, it suggests to me that there is no common ancestry from a single ancestral gene locus for all proteins, nor gradual stepwise route for their emergence. This problem would seem even more acute for proteins whose function is critically dependent on a multimeric quaternary structure, such as in topoisomerase. Thus, this reinforces the notion that proteins instantiate Platonic forms. Additionally, consider this experiment by Van Hofwegen et al., which showed that the DCUS protein in the long-term evolution experiment never recovered function over 80,000 generations following a mere 5 nucleotide deletion event. This experiment supports the anti-correlation hypothesis, but I would hope for hundreds more of such experiments in the future. In some cases, reductive evolution may be powered by natural selection, such as in declining IQs, as indicated by this study. Again, this reinforces the anti-correlation hypothesis. Even more pointedly, the famous long-term evolution experiment shows the anti-correlation between engineering fitness and population genetic fitness. Cooper and Lenski showed fitness increased in one environment and declined in multiple other environments that tested catabolic versatility. And this is strong evidence again in favor of the anti-correlation hypothesis, the anti-correlation between engineering definitions of fitness and adaptation versus the population genetic definition of fitness and adaptation. And beyond the fact that we are now in the 6th great extinction, the biosphere may be in an era of reduction and simplification. And using Wolf and Kunin's phrase, genome reduction. Genome reduction is the dominant mode of evolution. Declining genetic health over time in populations is a testable prediction, at least in principle, that could lend support to the anti-correlation hypothesis between engineering and population genetics. But in the meantime, let us all work together to preserve the ingenious designs in nature, composed of organs of extreme perfection and complication that constitute endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful. Thank you. Questions?